Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. So I thought it was a time for you to meet the two men who run Colorado. Without their endorsement, nothing politically possible ever happens. From the Denver Post editorial board, Dan Haley, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me on.
From the Colorado Springs Gazette, Wayne Laugesen, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you two boneheads, you both endorsed Hickenlooper for governor. Mm-hmm. I was, of course, a Dan Mays guy. Right. Gets funnier all the time.
That's great.
Have you been disappointed so far with the man you installed into office?
Right. Well, first of all, our choices were limited in the last election. But I think that...
Hey!
What? Right, you're the Dan Mays guy.
And Tom Tancredo was there.
And Jon Hickenlooper, who won 51% out of a three-way race, which is pretty hard to do in a three-way race. So I think Coloradans wanted him to be the governor. I think he's done a good job so far. We haven't seen a heck of a lot from him here in Denver. He's been out on the road, out in different counties, which I think is important to go out there and see the rest of Colorado. He's building this bottom-up economic plan to talk about jobs, which we'll be interested to see, you know, what comes of that and where that goes. If you look at a lot of what's happening at the State House, you've got the House and Senate Republicans putting out press releases saying, we stand with Governor Hickenlooper on this.
On no new taxes.
Right. It's a very interesting dynamic that he's immediately come in. He's got this split government with the House being controlled by Republicans by one vote. Senate is controlled by the Democrats. I think that will work in his favor. He won't have any of those sort of crazy bills from either side ending up on his desk, and he won't have to alienate and tick off the left or the right. So I think he's been set up in a nice fashion here.
He's actually had a nice long honeymoon, and he's taken to the job well. And I think people see that he knows what he's doing. You might disagree with his politics, but he understands the ins and outs of the office, I think, a bit better than his predecessor. All right, I understand the Denver Post. You know, I understand that you have a hotline directly from him, and so he picks up the line. There's a little red phone on your desk.
Absolutely.
He tells you what to endorse
exactly.
and
what to write.
Right to write. But down in the Springs, you don't have that kind of phone line. The Hickenlooper hotline to tell you what to write, and you still endorse this man.
That's correct, and I'm very glad we did. I'm thrilled with the decision that was unanimous by the board, and he told one of our board members he fell out of his chair when he saw it, so he was kind of surprised that we did that too. And it's not very often that the Gazette, in the conservative bastion of El Paso County, would endorse a Democrat and someone considered a liberal Democrat. But he is first and foremost a self-made businessman, and none of the other candidates had his kind of business credentials. None had ever legitimately written payroll checks. He's a businessman both in Denver and Colorado Springs, and I love the budget that he's proposed. I mean, we had a Republican rally going on outside of the Capitol building last week, and against Raleigh Heath's proposed tax increase, and Hickenlooper was sort of a hero of that rally, if you can believe it.
Don't worry, the tax increases are coming. I've tangled too often with Mr. Hickenlooper over taxes.
He can't
They're
do it
coming.
himself.
No, not this year. Not this year. Yeah. Well, there's no better salesman for a tax increase than Hickenlooper. Would you agree?
I agree. I mean, you saw what he did in the city of Denver. He obviously is not adverse to taxes.
I've noticed that.
But he's smart, I think, in playing it politically to say, right now is not the time. People can't afford it. If you put it out there, it's going to get killed. So we have to, cut the budget. And so here's my, I think he's making people take their medicine. And you're going to hit cuts this year and possibly next year, and then maybe after that, you come back with something that's a tax hike.
The other year that he didn't endorse any tax increases, the year he ran for re-election. Go figure that one. All right.
Oh, that's not true. I think that was the year of A through I, wasn't it, in 2007?
No. The A through I was the next year.
Next year. Okay.
No,
well, and Hickenlooper also, he told our editorial board this. I just have to take it at face value that he's very much opposed to the so-called dirty dozen tax increases that the legislature and Governor Ritter enacted last year.
The cuts to those tax.
Well, the elimination of those exemptions, which was, it's bizarre that those made it through the judiciary the way they did, because they were clearly a change in tax policy, which violates the Constitution of the.
Trust me, this Supreme Court doesn't care about violating the Constitution.
I get that.
The judiciary gave them the loophole to then go in and remove those tax exemption. So that stemmed from a court
You want to
ruling.
know what a loser I am? I'm the guy that made that happen because because I sued Ritter over the tax increase on the mill levy freeze.
The mill levy freeze,
and Mary Malarkey said, "Well, here's my opportunity. You can do whatever you want." And so, yeah, sorry about that, guys. Anyway.
Yeah. Unintended consequences of limited government.
All right. Then why hasn't Hickenlooper, seeing particularly what's going on in Wisconsin, and he's got to feel the pressure of the union benefits. Para is so upside down; it's going to cripple the state. Why hasn't he taken this opportunity to get rid of the executive order allowing unions in state government?
We've written 2 editorials asking, pleading with him to do that, and I think it would send a strong message to the unions, to city workers, to people in Colorado, that this is a new day. Send a strong message to business with a flick of his wrist that we're not doing things the old way that we did under Ritter, and it's not causing a problem now because there's no money in the budget. And when the money comes back, my thought is that it will become a problem at that point. And you're not going to pay union dues just to get a faster computer or for better customer service. You're going to want that cash and benefits to come back. You're going to want to restore some of the cuts that have been made to para, or where you've had to dip more of your cash.
Cuts to para?
They've had to put more of their money. State workers have had to put more of their money into para. And they'll want to restore that back. And it's easier to do that when you're unionized. So I think
let's
you
keep
should.
in mind. Let's keep in mind so people understand. That was an 98 or something that we passed the bill that gave para so much more, and therefore to say that we want it back. No, I want it back to the way it was before that. All right, but
my sense is that maybe he's using that as leverage down the road when he needs to use it. If he needs to do something with the unions, he can use that as some leverage. But I don't know that. That's just my guess, because he's a pretty politically savvy guy.
Mm-hmm. What do you say? You endorsed him. Call him up. Make this happen.
Well,
you're the kingmaker.
That's right. Yeah, and so is Dan, obviously. Didn't you do a front page editorial about Ritter's union when he signs that into?
Yeah, that was the only time I was actually willing to pay a quarter for the newspaper that day. That was a thing of beauty.
That was a great thing. Didn't work, but it was so much for the red phone.
It didn't work. No. He's not the governor.
That's true. That's right. No.
Budget crisis.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh no, you wanted to on para? Yeah. I'll call him up. I'll see what I can get. See. I'm sure he's going to listen to everything we say.
Just sign the
now that we endorsed him, because we could repeal the endorsement.
Right. Exactly. On second
really
thought.
Hurt him bad.
With Wisconsin leading the way, I mean, every state is looking at the overwhelming cost of public unions, and people are starting to understand. Wait a second. Even if somebody gets $50 grand a year pay, the benefits make it a $90 grand a year job. I mean, it's just back end and loaded. The budget process is underway. He's got to find $1 billion of savings. We came out with our citizens budget to show where some cuts could be, and we sat down with his office, and they seemed actually receptive on a few of those ideas. What's he going to do here? Because nothing else counts this year except the budget, because we've got $1 billion hole, and redistricting. What's he going to do?
Regarding the budget, I think he's going to cut K-12 education, or he's going to ask the state legislature to do it. They're the ones that actually have to write the budget and pass it, and I think that's where he wants to go. And I think part of that is that to let people feel the pain of this recession and the fact that the government revenues have dropped. In the past, they've balanced the budget with kind of the smoke and mirrors, moving money from reserves, raiding cash funds, raising taxes through the tax exemptions, raising fees. And I think he's saying, let's level it out and show you the structural problems here in this budget. That's my guess. And I think the legislature is going to go along with him.
I thought Amendment 23 said you can't cut K through 12 spending.
It does say that. I don't know exactly how the mechanics of that work, but obviously they can, because I mean they're looking at it, and I don't know. Do you know the mechanics of Amendment 23 and how they can get away with this?
There's something called the factors in the School Finance Act, and the factors are the number of disadvantaged, disabled kids that you have, different things like that. And so you can fudge around and cut the factors without cutting the per pupil funding. And so they're going to cut this down. And then next year, if they tried to do it, they'd probably get a lawsuit. Because they would cut into the things you couldn't.
I want the lawsuit.
I
want to see the CEA take on the state.
It's interesting. There is going to, if a Republican governor had been proposing the cuts that Hickenlooper is proposing, people would be going nuts. It would be Wisconsin. They'd be marching at the Capitol, and you're seeing nothing.
Are you saying there's a double standard?
We might see it, though. I talked to the head of the education union in Colorado Springs. when that budget was proposed. And he was taking sort of a wait-and-see attitude. We'll see if it actually, if the legislature's actually going to do this. We're going to see what happens first. He said, is there going to be war in Colorado? There might be, referring to war being, of course, what similar to something like what's going on in Wisconsin.
They're gonna ask him to take money out of reserves. What he did, in Ritter's budget for 2011, 2012, before he left office, he actually proposed a $55 million increase in K-12 education. He cut it last year. He proposed an increase this year. But he drained reserves down to the point where the state could operate for 2 weeks if there was some sort of crisis here, and it was down to 2%. Hickenlooper's put it back to 4%. Yeah. So that's where the fight, I think, is going to be over that, what's in the reserves. And I think it's smart to start building up the reserves, even if in a bad economy. You need something.
Isn't it funny that the most important part of the elected officer's job is the budget, and it's the worst thing to talk about. It's the worst thing to write about. It's the worst thing that holds people's attention because it's not fun and easy to understand. It's boring.
Well, and now Hickenlooper has said also that he's going to reduce get rid of a lot of state employees. Well, that too, but he's going to get rid of a lot.
Kind of in a mafioso way? Get rid of them?
Well, no, yeah.
Now we're talking.
Now a program I can get behind.
It has to do with the average age of these employees, baby boomers wanting to retire. It's time to get out. So he thinks he can do that fairly easily with minimal resistance. And I think we'll see
Trust
that.
me, I got friends who can do it with minimal resistance too.
But here comes para on the other side of that.
Right.
And there will definitely need to be changes to para if you're going to have more and more retirees.
Hey, go ahead. Finish up.
I want to say is that while we're on public employees, I think that we're gonna see a lot of resistance in Colorado, growing resistance to the kind of benefits and perks that public employees get. Because if you look at, except for Denver, almost every city up and down the Front Range of Colorado, for instance, workers' comp, you have employees who go on workers' comp, they get 100% of their salary while they're on workers' comp. Now, a private sector employee is going to get about 67%, and the state law says that government workers can receive, you must pay them 67%, not 100%.
But you don't have to pay them 100%.
But they get 100%. That's not taxed. So you get a tremendous raise to go on workers' comp. If you're injured, there's a not an insignificant, but a fairly significant financial incentive to stay home.
Do you realize every Colorado government worker that just heard what you said is going to run into a file cabinet Monday morning? You know, I mean, why not? Right. I would do so too.
And Denver's at 80%. Colorado Springs is going to lower it in April to 85%. But even at 85%, you have a financial incentive, a financial reward to not get yourself back to work. Now, at 67%, you have an incentive to get back to work. You're making less money.
Well, and again, because you're not paying income taxes.
Right.
Which is,
exactly.
And by the way, I think it's time we raise income taxes. That was my Muppet thing. Raleigh Heath and Carol Hedges from the Tax Increase Institute have decided it's time to go ahead and increase taxes. And your paper said, that's a mighty fine idea, but not this year. Not because it's not a good idea, but because it wouldn't pass.
Well, we didn't necessarily even say not this year. So what we said when Senator Heath proposed that was, if you're going to propose a tax hike at any time, but especially this year, it just can't be one guy throwing it out there. You need to build a whole coalition behind this. It needs to be bipartisan. You need to get business on board, and you need to make the point to Coloradans as to why this is needed. I think he put forward a very modest, reasonable tax increase. If you're going
only a 10% tax increase.
If you're going to increase taxes, it goes the state income tax 4.63 currently to 5%, which is where it was in '99 before Owens and the Republicans in the State House lowered it. And then the state sales tax goes from 2.9 to 3%, 0.1% hike. Which is where it was in 2000 before it was lowered. So that's a very moderate, I think, tax hike versus the one that Carol Hedges was putting forward, which was, she put forward all kinds of things to see what the title board would find appropriate. But it was, taxing people. It was an adjustable income tax. People who made $25,000 a year would be taxed at 6.5%. Over $250,000 is 9.5%. So we never commented on that in the Denver Post, but I'm fairly confident that we would say that is just not fair and too high. I could say that personally. I think to tax somebody making $25,000 a year at 6.5% is a crime.
But the governor, I mean, as you said, the governor is saying, not now, this is
Right.
a bad idea. You realize, I'm going to be on fighting a tax increase with Governor Hickenlooper.
This is the difference.
That's going to be fun.
This is the difference between Raleigh Heath and Jon Hickenlooper. They're both businessmen. They both have solid business backgrounds. Raleigh Heath was in big business. Jon Hickenlooper was in small business. He really gets it. I think that he understands that there's not enough money in the economy right now to raise taxes on anyone, and that can't do the overall economy any good right now. That we're not going to grow jobs. We're not going to have entrepreneurs creating new businesses if we take any more money out of the economy right now. He either believes that or he thinks that most people
Yeah, let me be a bit
feel
more
that
cynical.
way. So,
Remember, his first ad, or one of the first couple ads, was, we need to shrink the size of government. He said that in between showers.
Well,
he said that.
That's shocking, knowing that he was going to face $1 billion shortfall, that he would go on the record saying we needed to shrink the size of government.
Yeah, he had no choice. It was
Right.
going to happen.
Right.
The sun is going to rise tomorrow. But also on a Tea Party kind of year, he really couldn't do another message. If he comes out of the box in year one and increases taxes or endorses it, it's not going to happen. But there's still going to be another problem, because if Raleigh Heath, I swear, Raleigh Heath could close the budget gap by selling off his cufflinks. But if he wanted to, he's actually been fool enough to put his name on this proposal. As a guy who was fool enough to put his name on the health care initiative last year, by current law, you are now personally liable for any mistakes, now called fraud, that any of your petitioners make. So unlike me, I'll lose my house this year to legal fees, but Raleigh Heath has actually got some coin. So until the legislature fixes that, he's not going to run this. He's not that stupid, I would hope.
I don't know what he'll do, but I'm not going to also say that he's fool enough to do something like that, because I think it's bold to come out and propose those things. I think the things that you do are bold. I think that's part of the process, and we need citizens who are willing to go forward and push those things forward.
That's why you endorse.
We don't like any of your plans. That's why you endorse. but I'm glad that you do them, because it gives us something to write about.
That's why you endorse this ridiculous plan to have a supermajority to pass any more amendments, like Amendment 23, which you guys endorsed, but to repeal Tabor, that only takes 50%.
Right.
Yeah. We'll just let that go.
Raleigh he's a classic. I mean, he's from Boulder, so are you.
Oh.
He's not in the real world, okay? So, and this just underscores that in a very special way, I think, that he would come out with this right now.
And he gave me a fine idea, because you said this was a small increase upward. It's actually a 10% increase in taxes. I've proposed and put towards the title board a decrease, which is only 2% decrease. So if this is, if Raleigh's is just a tiny little tax increase, mine is even a tinier little tax decrease.
Right. That'll be great. So,
because I think that people should, on the ballot, if there's going to be a tax increase, let them see. They have the choice. They can go higher, they can do nothing, they can go lower. You're going to endorse me, aren't you?
Yeah, I was curious as to what you think the economic, will we see growth with a 4.5%?
Absolutely.
State income?
We lower taxes, more economic growth.
Worked great in the last decade.
It worked great in the last decade. Actually,
even though in the 1990s, when that tax rate was higher, the economy was better in Colorado than it was.
Shouldn't people have a choice? Decade. I mean, government only asks.
I can't believe I'm arguing for higher taxes here. I'm just saying.
Sure, you always argue for higher taxes.
Not always. That's not true.
There was a reporter's tax you didn't like.
Huh? A reporter's. We did oppose the getting rid of the tax exemption on newspaper sales. So.
Yeah, there.
Right.
Go. Those tax exemptions are bad, but fine. There was also a fun bill on the tax increase, fee increase for movie theaters. I think that was, you guys on board? So we'll just pay. Now they're a dime. Now where did that one go?
It ended up being a voluntary tax. They're going to put boxes in movie houses, and you can put some money in there that you have, whatever change you have left over from buying the $9 popcorn and the $10 soda, you can put in that box so they can film movies in Colorado. We opposed that tax hike, and not only did we oppose it, because they called it a fee, we said it was a tax hike, and if you were going to do it, you needed to go to voters under Tabor. How's that for your Denver Post?
Yeah, why the hell weren't you there on something that was more than a dime? Oh, I don't know, like the mill levy freeze.
We did not.
Or faster. Or
we didn't weigh in on that particular proposal. We did about 2 years earlier when there was a proposal in the legislature, and believe it or not, the Gazette actually came out in favor of it, which was it was a refund of sales taxes. Once a movie house had turned in a certain number of receipts and showed that they had spent a certain amount of money in Colorado and employed a certain number of people, they would get a percentage of it back. They had to spend it first. So that was a...
I'm trying to think of all the adult movie theaters on Colfax having a little... You have a dime for the arts? And, all right. Let's talk education. Douglas County just passed something pretty substantial, I believe. This was, I think, the first in the nation school district that has decided to have vouchers for up to 500 of their kids. I know it's a little out of the Colorado Springs area.
Just a little, not much, but yeah.
It's a little bit, but the point being, for the first time, we've got a school district saying, we're going to give kids a choice. Now, they did it for budgetary reasons because now they're going to get 25% of that kid's money and the parents can get the rest to go someplace else. They've made money and have less kids. Is this going to stand, I mean, or is this going to go forward? I'm excited.
It's going to be an interesting experiment because I think, if it goes well for Douglas County, then it's going to go, then a lot of other school districts in Colorado are probably going to look at it or follow suit. We have long come out in favor of vouchers in Colorado. It seems logical that if money follows kids, that it should follow kids to the school of a parent's choice. There are some downsides, obviously, with controls that can be attached to schools and students once you start attaching government money to kids going to a private school. But I think that this is just going to be interesting to watch. I think it's really going to pave the way for the rest of the state. It's either going to end the discussion or it's going to create a voucher system.
I think ladies and lawyers, start your engines is that call.
I hope they're not doing it for financial reasons. I think that's a lousy model for a school district to just figure out how to get rid of their kids so they can end up making some money. I hope they're doing it to create choice and competition in their district, and then see how their district schools respond to those 500 kids who are voting with their feet and saying, we want something else for our education options here, and we're going to take off. So I'm very interested to see what happens. We've been in favor of what the state did, 6-7 years ago, the limited voucher program, which was for poor families in failing school districts. This is for anybody who can get into this 500 student pilot program. So very interesting to see what happens. It's happening in a high-performing district versus in a really rough and tumble kind of place. So I'm interested to see what happens. There will be a fight over it. There will be a court suit, and it'll be based on the fact that you're spending public money in religious schools or possibly in religious schools, which goes back to the Blaine Amendment, which was passed in Colorado, I think, in the 1800s.
I think it was
a
original
time when there was anti-Catholic bigotry running amok, and that's where that law came from.
Has anti-Catholic bigotry ended?
It has ended.
Really?
Yes.
My priest never told me about that. All right, and the Blaine Amendment, which says you can't spend money on education. Before, on the voucher program that passed before, the CEA said, this is a local control issue.
They fought on local control.
Now you can't get any more local control than a school district.
Right.
Saying this. Who wins, do you think?
You mean in Douglas County?
Yeah. Who wins that fight?
I think the voucher people win. I think it'll prove to be. I think the voucher side wins. It's going to prove to be a very effective program, and I think it's going to improve education. You'll get better school. You're just going all the measures are going to go up in Douglas County over the years,
and satisfaction will go up. So,
right.
And they'll save a little money too.
And the other thing too is you're getting, I think, $4,800 for a family down there, and a lot of the schools cost a lot more than that. So the parents are going to have some skin in the game here too. They're going to put some money behind the tuition. If they're not happy, they're going to leave, and they're going to come back to their Douglas County schools or whatever. So we'll see. We'll be able to track and find.
In Denver, most of the Catholic schools, the tuition is between $3,000 and $4,000 for what I think is a far superior education.
Completely different circumstances in what's happening in Douglas County compared to Denver.
Fair enough. I'll concede. All right, I tell you what, we've only got a few minutes left. Let's go to what the world is looking at in China. You wrote Japan.
Same thing, isn't it?
Don't call me Oriental. I'm Asian. The reactor there, as this taping, it's still bad, but it's not anywhere close to Chernobyl levels.
Right.
You wrote a pretty compelling piece saying, wait a second, let's not get weird about this just yet.
Right.
What's the lesson from Japan?
Well, I think that, let's say the worst case scenario, let's say it goes Chernobyl, which I don't think is even possible.
It's not possible.
But let's say that happens. You're still going to have a lot more devastation from this earthquake and tsunami that wasn't related to the nuclear power problems.
Right.
Okay, and we have a big debate going on now in Pueblo County. They want to build a nuclear power plant, a sustainable energy park, just east of Pueblo.
With water rides, too. It's going to be good.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot less water today than it used to, so we wouldn't have considered this 20 years ago. But it's going to have windmills and solar and all of that. And we pointed out that windmills have killed many more people than nuclear power has.
Nuclear power, there's never been at least a confirmed.
Not in the United States.
Not in the United States.
No,
and
not at a commercial nuclear power facility. There have been a couple.
And the reason that Japan can't go Chernobyl is that it has an encasing that Chernobyl never had. Chernobyl was a weapons lab. It wasn't a power plant.
We had a letter writer, I think, in Thursday's paper, say that Chernobyl was the Yugo of nuclear power factories, and it really was. So you can't compare that, and especially the newer facilities are so much better than than the ones that are having problems in Japan. So my point in all this is we've supported the development of nuclear power for energy for lots of reasons, but you can't make decisions right now based on what's happening in Japan. You need to let this thing play out and use science and find out exactly what the problems were.
Doesn't it say something that a 40-year-old reactor getting hit by one of the largest earthquakes in history ever, where the whole island moves 12 feet and we still don't have a Chernobyl? Isn't there something saying, wait a second, that takes a licking and keeps on ticking, at least to some degree?
I think so, and hopefully that's the way the debate will go as this story matures. Is that the people who are advocating nuclear power plants and electric cars and everything that goes with them can say, look, even with that earthquake and tsunami.
Caldara's political axiom number 2. Reason always loses to emotion.
Right, and that's my fear, is the PR disaster here is going to contain, hold back anything. As we were talking about earlier, Jane Fonda made an anti-nuclear film in the late 70s, and we haven't developed anything since then because it freaked everybody out. And this
so in other words, if only we get Jane Fonda to agree with us, we're back on.
And
Dan, thank you. I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Okay.
Wayne, thank you. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. We'll see you next week.